all good.
Right. So, if we want to have a look at the tariff, the purpose of the tariff is to protect local industries, is to try and protect local jobs, and the basic problem is the stuff coming in from overseas is cheaper than what we can produce domestically. So, start with this if you want a diagram to show it. This is the domestic marketplace. There's your domestic price, and OQ will be the amount of domestic production. So we make this much of it, and we charge this much for each one. Now this stuff comes in from overseas. Rather than trying to remember the whole diagram, build it up, it's much easier. So put in what you know first. That the world price, the stuff of these imports, the price of these imports, is lower than what we can do domestically. What effect does that have on the marketplace? Our domestic supply line is made up of a whole stack of individual suppliers. Factory up here, factory down here, factory down here. Very efficient factory, a factory that can only produce when the price is very, very high. So the effect of this stuff coming in from overseas is that these Australian producers, this part of our supply line, can no longer make a profit at this price. So these firms will leave the industry. What happens to the rest of the Australian manufacturers? Well, these Australian manufacturers here are very efficient. These guys will stay in the industry. So after this stuff comes in from overseas, domestic production will go to Q1. So we've got this contraction back this way. But because the goods are cheaper, the consumers actually decide, well, no, we want to buy more of this stuff, it's cheaper. So in response to the price drop, there will be an extension of demand out to Q2. So go again. Coming in from overseas at this price, domestic producers still able to make a profit will supply this much of the market. Consumers, however, want to buy this much, so the difference between how much we want to buy and how much we can produce domestically, this amount has to come in from overseas. It's coming in from overseas at the expense of these Australian manufacturers. Okay, so what's the effect of a tariff? Each one of these things coming in from overseas, you place a tax on it. You make it more expensive to purchase. So it has the effect of raising that world price. It's the landed price of the goods. Okay, what happens next? Because you're now moving to price with a tariff, P2, price with a tariff here, because you've increased the price to this level, these marginal Australian producers will re-enter the industry. They're the jobs you're actually protecting. So when you come down here, Q3, this is the response to the higher price. We've gone from domestic producers producing OQ1, to OQ3. The other effect at the other side, because it's now more expensive, consumers will have a contraction of demand back to Q4. Right, so we did want this much, but now we only want this much because it's more expensive. So now the gap here is your imports after the tariff. That was imports before the tariff, that's imports after the tariff. These are the Australian jobs being protected. The last thing you can show using this is, because you put a tax on, the government's made some money. The whereabouts is the money. Each good will attract an amount of tax of that amount, and it will be levied on the number of imports that still come into the country, which is this amount. So it's price times quantity. So the government revenue will be shown by that little rectangle in the middle there. That's how you show a tariff.